I'm so excited to welcome you to this workshop where we're going to explore what it takes to be anti-fragile. And while resilience, apologies, allows you to bounce back, anti-fragility catapults us to bounce forward. So turning challenges into opportunities for growth and transformation. Our hosts today also introduced the famous C.O.D.E, a framework for making high impact, high risk decisions based on the context of the challenge or opportunity, the orientation of yourself or your business within it, developing your plan, and empowering the plan with levers and amplifiers for greater success and outcomes. I'm so looking forward to just such an insightful session with all of you. So let's get started. My name is Liz Manihakiza. I am the program coordinator of membership and community here at the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, or CanWCC, as we call it for short. My pronouns are she, her, and I live and work in the lands of the Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda, and Blackfoot Nations, as well as the Métis Nations in a region covered by Treaty 7, colonially known as Calgary, Alberta. The Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce is the first and only chamber of commerce for diverse women-identified and non-binary business owners in Canada. And as a chamber of commerce, we represent your needs with the government, and our position and title as a chamber gives us access to people who impact change. We exist to improve the quality of life for the over 1 million entrepreneurial Canadian women through advocacy with policymakers, and we aim to build a healthier and more inclusive Canadian economy and raise and amplify the voices of diverse women and non-binary entrepreneurs, and of course, to fight for their economic equity. Now, let me introduce your host today. We have CanWCC members, Sanka Kangudi, and Katia Tripod, or Tripod. Sanka is a visionary strategist with over 2 decades of corporate leadership, and her is reshaping the SMB landscape through her pioneering C.O.D.E methodology at Trendsetting at Work. Her expertise in cultivating antifragile mindsets enables businesses to thrive amid uncertainty, fostering a cascade of positive change that extends from employees to communities. And we have Katia with over 25 years of experience as a global HR executive and in startups, enterprises, and NPOs. And she brings a multifaceted expertise to organizational dynamics. Her Wharton MBA education and Six Sigma certification enhances her deep understanding of business and cultural nuances. So that's, and of course, as a certified professional coach, she excels in unlocking human potential and fostering breakthroughs. Now, I will let the floor to you, woman, and I thank you once again for accepting to host this event with us.
Thank you. It is great to see all of you. Some of you I've known already. I started to see people sign up, and so I was so curious as to who everybody was and what everybody did. So I'm so happy you guys took a bit of time out of your day to spend a little time with us. Do we want to start the slide? Just to give you guys a little bit of an overview. We will be going through the C.O.D.E, but we will also be talking about yourselves. The C.O.D.E doesn't work if you're not aware of what's happening with you and the people around you. So part of being unbreakable is understanding how you feel and how you walk through the world. What we're going to do is, if you would like to go to the next slide, we're going to take 45 minutes to cover 3 main areas. Unveiling what hides in plain sight. I've been working in the business world for a very long time, longer than I'd like to admit. And what we notice all the time is that an organization can have all the right ingredients, but if they're not aware of self, if they're not aware of the human factor within the business, the recipe will never come to fruition. The second thing we'll talk about is the anatomy of decisions. We like to talk about decisions as being, particularly in the professional area, as being professional, as being very much business oriented, and that's not always true. Katia will talk about some of the rackets that we tell ourselves, and then we'll go into the decision-making framework, which is C.O.D.E. You can go to the next, please. So before we get started, many of you are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, have micro businesses, and oftentimes we feel like we're on an island alone carrying the weight of the world. And so I'd like to take a moment today to ask you, how would you currently describe how you feel right now? We'll take 2 minutes to do that. Okay. It's funny, sometimes we go through our days, we're so much in automatic that we don't actually realize how we are feeling and what's happening within us. And so I think it's really important for us to center ourselves before we get into it. Excellent. And so, Lise, would you put up the results just for curiosity's sake? Oh, good. Good. That speaks volumes. And also it makes total sense why each of you are here today. So that's excellent. Let's go to the next slide. Did you know that 65% of startup failures are not due to cash flow, as many of us would think? It's really due to management decisions that affect everything else. The other thing to really keep in mind is that 50% of founders will suffer burnout at some point in their career. What's really interesting about that is that that also includes people who reach great levels of success. We often assume that if you're reaching burnout, if you're having a hard time, it's because things are not going well. But in fact, particularly when you're being everything to everyone all the time, whether you succeed, whether you're going through a high point or a low point, that burnout, that mental weight exists. And I know I'm looking at Shalamit right now, and she knows exactly what we're talking about. Could you go to the next slide, please? That leads us to the fact that we must be conscious about what is happening to our bodies as we face some of these challenges and opportunities that we come to every day. And so I look at what is happening in the world right now. Everybody's talking about it. Just 6 months ago, most people were saying, we're doing business. We don't want to talk about politics. We don't want to talk about things like that. It is not the place. Now we see that we don't have that luxury anymore. And with that reality comes a lot of emotional and neuroscience related, what's the word I'm looking for? Consequences to our reactions to what is happening around us. So let's dive a little bit into what's happening internally. So I always tell my team that our greatest competitor is the status quo. So before any other organization, before any of the competition we like to say about ourselves in the landscape of business, the biggest one is the status quo. Our brains and our habits are often related to our preference to the current state of affairs. What's interesting is even if we're miserable, sometimes we will prefer to stay in the misery because it's what we know than do something else. And so we fear potential losses so much more than we value potential gains. So someone had said there was a test that was done where they offered them $100 if they did an exercise and they with a mug, and what they decided to do was they rather keep the mug than take the $100. And so it tells us our brains would rather prefer to stay in the cocoon that we know. But today, things are moving so fast that, again, that is a luxury that we have to find a way to get over, under, and around. Could you go to the next slide? So what happens when we're faced with challenge? Our brains actually want to reward us for staying the same. And so dopamines will start to react as we look at familiar choices, right? That coziness. It's oftentimes, you find it a lot today when people talk about, well, back in the day, things were so much better. And I realize now, not really. It was a different kind of challenge, but it wasn't necessarily better. But because we're facing so much uncertainty today, we start to create a nostalgia and start to look at our past and our current status through rose-colored glasses. So for instance, choosing the same restaurants repeatedly, even though there are new options and adventures that for our palate that we could entail. Next slide. One thing I realized, there was a moment in my life where I really needed to change. I had great ambitions and I had tried a million different things and I just wasn't getting to where I wanted to go. And when I made the choice to do the hard things that would really give me the future I wanted, I started to get major migraines. And that was because my body was resisting to the changes I was making. And it was thinking that it was protecting me. So sometimes we manifest physical discomfort or anxiety when we're faced with new decisions, with new situations, with uncertainty. And that's literally a physical reaction. But do not fret, because we can get around it. We can get through it, especially once we're conscious. So the framework that we're going to talk about later on would lose all power if you were not conscious of what is happening within you. Then there's always, especially if you're a leader, decision fatigue. I think also, just as a woman in the world today, we have become the decision makers for everybody and for ourselves. Again, once again, we are everything to everybody all the time, everywhere. And so it is, and when we live through the stress cycles that we are living through now, just for context, 2019, we got COVID. Between 2019 and 2025, just think for a second about all the things that have happened. And we're not even talking about your personal life. We're just talking about the world. It's been shook up. It's been slammed. It's been totally there's a card in tarot, the tower card, where the tower will just crumbles. That's essentially what we're living through right now. There's good news, but in the moment, it is highly uncomfortable. And so as we're having to make these decisions in reaction to what's happening in the world, and then again, decisions in reaction to our businesses, to our families, with our children, decision fatigue is a chronic symptomatic situation right now across the world. We are still, and I know some people might disagree, this might be a trigger for somebody, but I truly believe that after the pandemic, the world was in a phase of post-traumatic stress. And with so many other things, global crises, war, chaos with supply chains, et cetera, it has not given us the chance to breathe, to heal, to make sense of where we are today and aware of how we feel today. And then on top of that, we're expected to make decisions about our businesses and about our families and about our employees in some cases. So it's normal to find yourself making impulsive decisions. It's like you get stuck in firefighter mode to avoid making decisions altogether, because now you have decision paralysis, because there's so many things that are going wrong that you're afraid to add to that. And we end up relying heavily on shortcuts and biases. So this is what we're going to try to help you get up and around today. So sometimes we have to figure out at what point our analysis has become paralysis. And so we need to be aware that additional information won't significantly improve at some point. This is one, in all transparency, I fight with every day. I always want to do a little bit more research, check out just one more thing, ask one more person, because I really want to make the right decision for me and everybody that counts on me. So I do it myself. I've instilled the 70%, right? If I have at least 70%, I can make a viable decision that will get us to the next step, right? Instead of waiting for 100%. Because if you wait to be perfect, you may miss your opportunity. And then implement reversible decisions quickly. So sometimes we need to realize that we're not saving lives in this moment, that the decision we make as to if we're going to go with this client or if we're going to go with this vendor is not going to make or break our business. And so we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace that maybe it won't be the best decision right now, but you know what? It's okay. We'll figure it out. And then practice making small decisions quickly. So if you're a procrastinator by nature, this is one of the ways that you can start taking steps forward. Make small decisions really quickly. Realize that the sky isn't falling, and that will give you confidence to make others. Next slide, please. And now I hand you over to the capable hands of Katia.
Thank you, Sanka. So, good afternoon, everybody. So, talking about making decision and taking action, what is actually at the heart of any action you take? The true source of action is a way of being and acting. It has nothing to do with reasons, decision, commitment, knowledge, emotion. We believe it does. Those are excuses. It has everything to do with the way you will behave towards a situation. I like to say that your future determines your present, not your past. Why? Because everything you do today, it's in order to achieve something tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or whenever the time comes. And whatever you're going to decide today will have a complete impact on your future. If you let your past determine your future, well, you might stay in the same place. That's what we sadly, like Sanka said before, tend to do. We like our little comfort. Why do we do that? I know it's hard when we hear that we are inauthentic, but I have to raise my hand first. I am in many ways because I would say yes to someone feeling like, oh God, why did I do that? I'm sure it never happened to any of you. I'm the only one. But it is something that when we don't pay attention to those things, we pay for it. Nobody else. And usually when you are inauthentic, you start to feel that you lose power in some area of your life, that you don't feel free to do what you really want because you have to comply with what people expect, right? You put your self-expression aside because it's easier to be what people expect than try being you. And honestly, being inauthentic will never let you approach new possibilities. It will keep you stuck exactly where you are. And we are inauthentic to protect ourselves, actually. It's not because we are bad people. It was something that was learned since we were kids. We had to be the nice girl to please mama. So we kept that nice girl attitude towards our life, and we fall back to those reflex, if you want, especially when we don't know how to act and what to do. So,
The
oops,
Arts and Sciences speed reading.
wait, not now. So, sorry. In order to also understand people better, because we, like I said, we all tend to be inauthentic for many reasons. It could be because we want to protect ourselves, or we try to protect you by not saying the full truth because we are afraid you might not take it. And the best way for us to have the right time of the day is to be capable of reading people better and invite them when we see that something in their face does not ring properly with the words. We need to learn to, first of all, listen, really. You know, that famous active listening? It's an act. You listen to everything: tone, words, body language, micro expression. So here I just wanted to share with you we have 7 major ones that are known worldwide. Actually, we have more than that, but the most common ones. But I want just to go with the 3 ones that sometimes we do not interpret fully properly. And then we may not continue the relationship or the discussion the right way just because we believed one thing and it was another one. So let's see what Vanessa has to say about that.
One of my favorite people hacks, and it has to do with the microexpression. So the microexpression is a very quick, universal facial expression that everyone makes across genders, cultures, and races. The thing is there are 7 of these universal facial expressions. And when you know how to speed read them, you can often sense people's internal emotions. So I want to teach you my favorite 3. The first one is contempt. So contempt is the simplest of all the microexpressions. It's just a one-sided mouth raise, also known as a smirk. So most people mistake contempt for a half smile or boredom, but actually contempt is a very powerful emotion. It means scorn, disdain, or pessimism. So watch out for that one-sided smile or smirk because it does not mean anything positive. The second one I want to teach you is the difference between real happiness and fake happiness. Anyone can do a fake smile. The difference between a real smile and a fake smile is when the smile reaches all the way up into the upper half of the face, specifically the crow's feet. So when I smile for real, you can see that smile all the way up into my eyes. Watch out if you see someone fake smiling or not using their upper cheek. The last expression that I want to teach you is called disgust. So this microexpression is when we flash the upper whites of our teeth and crinkle up our nose. It's the face we make when we smell something bad. So it looks like this. You might be wondering, Vanessa, why would I ever see disgust? But actually, you sense or see disgust when someone is trying to think of a polite way to lie. So you ask someone, hey, what do you think of the new girl? And they say, oh, yeah, she's pretty good. When anyone holds their face in that disgust microexpression, you know that they slightly dislike something and you want to give them permission to give you the truth. I hope you use those 3 microexpressions because they can give you a great speed read into someone's personality.
So I hope this was helpful for some of you. And definitely what you observe and sometimes what we feel, you know, the gut feeling when sometimes we feel like it's off. Trust it. You have seen, heard things without noticing, and they are here and they disturb you with reason. Here I go quickly into emotional intelligence as they are completely linked, if you want, because without emotional intelligence, it's very, very hard to understand yourself to start with. It's all about self-awareness. Again, you need self-awareness to be authentic. So it's a short clip to just give you back the principle of emotional intelligence.
What distinguishes great leaders from average ones? A factor that psychologists call emotional intelligence, also known as EQ. When Daniel Goleman analyzed executives at nearly 200 companies, he found emotional intelligence was twice as important as both IQ and technical ability in driving performance. At the most senior levels, it accounted for a whopping 90% of the difference between the best and the rest. But what exactly is emotional intelligence? According to Goleman, it's made up of 5 components: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill. Let's examine each in turn. Self-awareness is understanding one's own emotions and their effect on others. Self-aware leaders are confident and candid. They can realistically assess and talk about their strengths and weaknesses, often with a self-deprecating sense of humor. Self-regulation is the ability to control or redirect disruptive impulses, essentially to think before acting. Effective self-regulators tend to be trustworthy, comfortable with ambiguity, able to suspend judgment, and open to change. Motivation is a passion to work with energy and persistence for reasons beyond money or status. It means being driven, goal-oriented, optimistic, and committed to the organization. Empathy is the ability to understand the emotional needs of others and to treat them accordingly. Empathetic leaders are good at developing and retaining talent, serving clients and customers, and managing cross-cultural sensitivities. Social skill is proficiency in managing relationships, developing networks, building rapport, and finding common ground. It makes leaders more persuasive and helps them create change. According to research, we can all increase our level of emotional intelligence with training that activates the brain's limbic system, which governs our feelings and impulses. This works best in 3 steps: incentive, extended practice, and feedback. And because all the EQ components are interconnected, you'll find that improving in one area can help you do better in the others too. Consider an executive whose colleagues say she is low on empathy because she doesn't listen well. She checks her phone in meetings, sometimes interrupts people, and often glosses over or disregards differing points of view. When her boss points this out, the executive is surprised. In her view, she was just being efficient and direct. But the feedback incentivizes her to improve. Privately, she replays certain incidents and thinks about how she could have acted differently. She also watches leaders who are good listeners and tries to mimic their behavior. With continued guidance from her boss, she gradually becomes more empathetic, boosting both the team's morale and its productivity. There's no question that leaders still need raw intelligence and good technical ability, but that's a baseline. Great leaders must also have or develop the 5 components of high emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill.
Thank you, Harvard Business Review. Well said, well done. And that's a very good intro, because knowing yourself is, for me, the first thing we have to do. Know thyself and you will know the universe. That's a very deep truth. So knowing yourself is about also understanding, we all know we have hidden mechanism or bias, but we don't always know when they come, they appear. And we don't always realize they are active because they are such a part of us today. One is what we call the rackets. We all have rackets, not to play tennis this time, but that's what we use against people. It's a defense mechanism if you want. You go to your rackets when you are not comfortable in the situation and you feel that you have a payoff being that specific type of persona or acting a certain way. Like some people, they always need to finish, have the last word, and be right. They don't care if they will fight with you. They don't care if they will hurt you. They have to be right. And usually when someone has to be right, someone has to be wrong. That goes together. And unfortunately, we don't go to a win-win. Some people, they always need to justify why they do things. It's a default. I don't know if you think about people when I go through those examples. You may know some people like that. Or they always have to be the big one. Like we know someone next door in the US using superlative every time he's speaking about himself, in case you know who I'm talking about. He's always the best, the biggest, and the greatest. And even when he does a contract, the contract is beautiful. I'm amazed. Anyway, those people need to always dominate, and they don't care what they will do to you in order to get there. That's why those payoff, they are nice for the person using it, even though not really, because you are totally inauthentic when you do that, because you protect yourself, but they have a huge cost, you know, because that will hurt yourself physically, emotionally. That may even make you get distanced with some people. Talking with someone who always needs to be right, after a while, I don't know. I personally try to avoid them because I know the conversation already, how it goes, and it's not interesting. Nobody can debate, so. And they can't stop themselves. That's the thing. That's why it's very important to recognize our own rackets. What is the act I go to when I'm in certain situation where I push to be right, where I will start to become a bit of a bully against you because I want to show that I'm the one who knows and you don't. And we all have them. So the good thing is to catch yourself, because usually it's something that persists. Even though you sometimes realize it doesn't do you any good, you still do it. You still go back to that one. It's stronger than you if you want. So it's a good thing to try to figure out which one you have. And once you know, you tend to catch yourself. Sometimes you're already in it, so you continue what you have started, and you be like, next time I won't be going there. You start to catch yourself sooner. That's one of the parameters that we need to consider about ourselves. We also have what we call trump cards in certain techniques in psychology. And that's again an act. It's an habitual way to become when we don't feel comfortable. It's always, we start to become inauthentic when you feel threatened, uneasy. I believe you understand what I'm talking about so far. Any question or comments? You follow me? Because I know it's a bit new concept. So, and those, usually we have 3 trump cards that we will go to, not more, even though there are many, many more. But the victim, I am a victim, nobody likes me, why me, boo hoo hoo, that's one. And of course, those attitudes will put off other people. They will stop going after you if you start crying because you're a victim, or if you start to become very angry. It's putting off people. They will go like, oh, okay, you're angry, I'm leaving you. It's a defense mechanism that is hurtful because it's not actually telling the truth about what you really need. It's hiding the real situation with a reaction. So that's an explanation of the trump card. Just one thing I want to say on that slide is always remember that as long as you are inauthentic, you almost punish yourself from new possibilities, real relationship. You can't really grow the way you want. You become really stuck. Now it's about inventing new possibility, because once you start to know who you are in those moments, you can change it. You can stop yourself, because I know exactly what my racket is, and if my kids were there, they would certainly shout it to you. But I'm always right anyway. But I'm the mom too. So, but anyway, so now that I know that, I try to not make my point, listen to what they have to say. I'm still right though, but I don't have to say it anymore. So here I have a few questions that are really more for you to really reflect, because once you start to ask those questions, you realize where you are or you have been inauthentic in your life. Where do you experience loss of power, freedom, or self-expression? Could be any domain. The question is why? Why do, because you do it to yourself. Nobody is doing it. It's you doing it to yourself. What trump card do you use to avoid accountability? What would you, what would a created you and created life that you actually author look like? Not something that was expected, that you do because it's convenient. How can you move from a future derived from the past to one given by possibilities? We let always the past define you. Whether you have succeeded, we believe we can succeed. Where you have failed, you believe you should not try again or whatever. Let's go and say we are a white page today and forget about what happened yesterday. Today, the new you, the person who wants to be fully authentic, decide to do X. And you will be amazed how capable you are to do X. If you would go further and develop, your program, even by bullet point, you would be like, whoa, much better than I thought. How can you move from a future derived from the past? Well, I already said that. What would it look like for you to be free to be and act in constrained area of your life? So those are questions for you to ruminate on your own. It's not something, when I was starting to answer those questions for myself, I would go back to them very often and add things and change things, because I also realized that I was lying in my own answer just because it was a habit. Not to lie, but for me, it was, this is X because it has always been. Until I asked, do I really want it to be like that? And then I was like, no, let's make it a Y then. Here I have questions that I would like you to work on for a few minutes. Because to really, really, really understand what Sanka would like to do right after, those questions are very important. You need to be fully honest with yourself. Nobody is going to read your notes unless you want to share them, but really to say, I've been pretending that. In whatever, you choose one aspect in your life, business, whatever, where you've been pretending that I was okay to be always, you know, the one working more than everybody else, blah, 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 whatever it is. When in fact, you're not okay. You want to be heard. You want your voice to be heard by everybody else. You want to be recognized and all these kind of things. The impact of that inauthentic way of being and acting is that you are frustrated all the time or whatever. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but that's the way you should, you know, play with those questions. The whole time I've been acting this way, what's been missing is any sense of, usually you don't really feel proud or happy or fulfilled when you are not authentic. I don't see it, not with me at least, it doesn't work. And then finishing saying, like, standing there, the possibility I am inventing for myself and my life is, and that's where you create your new future. So I will let you go through those questions. I don't know how long you need after that, Sanka.
I will make it work.
So I guess about 3 minutes. The idea is just to when you start to answer the question, you realize how inauthentic we are very often, just because most people are expecting you to be a certain way and you don't want to go through doing it differently. So you just comply.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think these are questions and sentences that we should do on a regular basis, right? Maybe not all of them, especially when you're faced with a particular challenge, especially when you feel that adrenaline kick, right? I know when there's every morning I open up my phone and I see the headlines, there's that adrenaline kick. And I have to ask myself questions like that so that I can get recentered, right? If I stay in that space, I am no longer making the right decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I am not seeing things clearly, because my brain understands fight, flight, fear, protection. It doesn't understand the nuances. And so I have to implement the nuances so that I can get a better idea of what's really going on. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes I'm human. I've had many employees in my career, and sometimes they will do something that will make that right. And I blush, right? So, and the red will show up right away. And I have to ask myself, first, turn your tongue 7 times and really think, am I reacting to the real situation? Am I getting confused by the delivery of the message and not the message? Are they really trying to tell me that they're having trouble with something and not insulting me? Right? Ask yourself what you are reacting to And that's why that's the real reason why we went through all of these steps before we talked about the code. Obviously, there's 45 minutes, so we can't do a deep dive. If ever you feel, any of you feel that this is worthwhile and that you guys would like to go, y'all would like to go deeper, we'll be happy to maybe create a webinar that's a little bit longer so that we could really go into the bigger details and so that we can do practices and you can implement them with your own challenges or opportunities at the time, and we can do a workshop that way. For today, we wanted to introduce you to the concept. We are not here to change your minds, but we're hoping that you will maybe consider, that you will maybe reflect, that you'll maybe look at a situation or even the people in the situation differently, right? I know that these kinds of things has helped me enormously with changing prospects into clients, because I'm aware, I'm paying attention to their body movements, their tone of voice. I'm aware, I try to put myself in their situation and figure out what's their racket, right? And how could what we do at Trendsetting at Work help them? And when we talk about people who always need to be right, I don't need to be right. So if it makes you feel better to think that you are right and we can move forward, yay. I'm here for it. We can do this. So if you go to the next slide, we'll go into the nitty-gritties and introduce our decision framework. So once you are aware of where you stand, once you are considering and giving grace to the fact that other people are feeling stress, paralysis, anxiety, anger as well, now we can start looking at, okay, what can we do? We're in said situation. We have this challenge. We have this opportunity. How do we move forward? And so this framework came from my experience through consulting, being a solopreneur, being a micro business owner, being an executive on a global scale. And so adjusting has been a part of my reality forever. And through time and trial and error and advising CEOs and COOs, et cetera, founders and solopreneurs, and helping them through their transformations, business-wise, I started to realize that there was certain key things that I was doing that was leading to the success of these projects and mandates. And that's how C.O.D.E was born. You can go to the next slide, please. So the C.O.D.E offers a strategic long-term perspective for building antifragility, right? When I learned about antifragility, I abide to it less as a system and more as a philosophy. I started to wonder why I was able to do the things that I was able to do, why I continued to try to do the impossible and think that the impossible could be possible. And I realized it's because I never took anything as a failure. I took it as a step forward. I took it as a moment to mitigate, to leverage, to, lean into, to manage, or even to let go of. And that started to formulate in the business context, like, okay, so here is the situation. Before I decide to create a project for an organization, for example, I would maybe consider who's going to be involved and see how they feel about it. So I started to ask around to get a better, clearer picture of the context. And so if you want to go to the next slide. Before we make a decision, we need to understand context. Unfortunately, today, and I would even say for hundreds of years and decades, people would look at what was in front of them, or they would react to the emotion of the challenge that they faced, and they would make a decision accordingly, not realizing all the blind spots. So what I encourage our clients to do, and what we try to frame in our business, is context includes not only what is happening in the world, not only what is happening in your profession or your industry, but what is happening inside of you and what is happening inside the people that you're working with, or the people that you need as allies to be able to move forward. And so that's where the work we've done today comes in. The second thing that you can consider is, for instance, the industry, what's happening with the World Economic Forum, right? Find out what's happening economically, politically, legally. Look at what's happening in pop culture and social networks. Really look at what other industries are doing to address some of the challenges you have, because we are always borrowing solutions that they have in other industries and applying it to the context that we are in. The idea is to really get a full picture of what is going for you, what's going against you, what you can control, what you can't control, like the tariffs, for instance. You can't control that, right? So how do you get around it, over it, under it, through it? You got to get more context. The second thing is orientation. Once you understand all the checkers or all the chess pieces, now you can start thinking, okay, where do I or my business fit in that? Right? Now I understand what the risks are. I understand what the context is. I also understand what's going for us. And if you're brave, give yourself a little time to be creative. If I could do anything, what would it look like? And use that to kind of decide where you fit in the face of your opportunity or your conflict or your challenge. Once you have that, now you have all the ingredients for your recipe. Now you can start building a plan. One thing I would say is, I think measuring is really important. Having a plan is really important, but there's a truth to the saying that, we make plans and the universe laughs, right? You need to know that that plan needs to have real milestones, but the way you get to those milestones may change because you need to be adaptive, right? Don't commit. Do not commit to the plan, commit to the results. I say this because every day I see people that have said, I've put this much investment in doing it this way. I've got to keep doing it, but it doesn't work. And so I find myself saying, well, do you want to get there? Because if you do, how you get there, albeit with authenticity, legally, integrity, all of these aspects, of course. But there's a million ways to roam, right? Which means that gives you a million opportunities to course correct, to leverage things that you face. So once you've developed that plan, then you start finding ways to empower the plan, right? So you've got a plan. So for us, I'll use us as an example. So we've always been global, right? But when we saw the elections, because we have a lot of contacts in the United States, but when we saw the elections happen, we realized that maybe we need to lean in different directions, just in case. We don't want to abandon our US friends, but we need to be able to keep making revenue. And so we started looking at Europe, we started looking at Uruguay, et cetera, et cetera. The tariff threat came in at the beginning of this year, but we had already started building pipelines, right? Now with the tariffs that come in, it means that we just need to lean more into our pipelines, right? To really focus on the different areas so that we can make sure that we diversify enough to survive and thrive. Looking for ways to empower. So another instance, CAN WCC is a great empowerment lever, right? I have met fantastic people within this organization, people that even if you can't work with them today, having them in your Rolodex, please tell me you know what that means. Having them in your network, right, means that you have an ally. It also means that you have a collaborator, or that they'll meet someone that knows someone. I've introduced people several times because I might not be able to use their services, but I know somebody who needs them, et cetera, et cetera. That's how we empower, because we will be better, we will go faster, we will go much further if we do it together. And that empowers your levers. That gives you courage. It makes you feel like you're not alone. And it really starts to put you in a position where you can go and do many things faster and better than if you had to learn how to do everything yourself. So that's just a short introduction to what the C.O.D.E framework is. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, so I'm always available anyways. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on our platform as well. I would love to open the floor to some questions or comments. Remember that it is only impossible until it becomes possible, right? And that sometimes we may not see where we're going, but that's exactly the time where we can never quit. This is the time where we get in the trenches and we hold, right? It is not the time to retreat. We've gone too far as women. We've battled as underserved communities. We've worked too hard to go backwards. We can do this. And if you don't feel like you can do it alone, call somebody, reach out to somebody. I've met nothing but good people since I've joined CanWC. So with that, I thank you so much for your time, for hanging out with us. I'll give it to you, Lise.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanka and Katia. I must say for myself, I took down quite a bit of notes, even though I know that this is recorded, but just so that I have access to this information and I can kind of get started to think on all these internal biases that I've been putting on myself. So thank you so much for that. And Katia, I don't know if you have any last words to say as well. No? Oh, yes. Go ahead.
It's hard after Sanka because she already said so many wonderful things about the people, the organization, and so on. No, it was very nice to meet you all, and I definitely hope that you leave with something interesting in your hands.